Hi guys, this is Steve Nozil from Outsider Garage. Tonight I'm going to tell you a story that started with friendship, community, and opportunity, and ended in lies, deception, and theft. This is the story of Derek Allen Banks and his company, Simply RB of South Dakota. In the early summer months of 2021, Derek Allen's shop, Simply RB, had tens of thousands of dollars in down payments on new jobs, multiple Skylines in his shop, and all the opportunity in the world to create a reputation for himself in the community. By October the same year, he was living out of his shop with police breathing down his neck. He was planning to liquidate his shop assets, go to Canada, buy a yacht, and flee the country. How did all this happen? Well, first we need to start at the beginning. So back in May of 2020 is when this whole mess started for me. Derek messaged me about the wheels on my R32. And it was a friendly conversation, and we got to talking. And as anybody who knows me, I'm always open and glad to talk about Skylines. It's something that I'm passionate about. And I enjoy sharing stories and listening to people talk about things that they're passionate about too. We chatted, from time to time from then, but starting about, I think the following January 2021, is when we started to discuss plans of working together in a business capacity. At the time, Derek had, he had been talking about, his GTR. He claimed to be a 1300 horsepower GTR. I'll throw some pictures of it up right here so you guys can take a look. These are the pictures that he sent me. Beautiful, beautiful car. Really, you could tell there's some money into this thing. I don't know about the 1300 horsepower claim, but it is a gorgeous car. So right off the bat, Derek was telling me how, he's an engine builder. He knows how to assemble. He's going to open up a machine shop. He's going to have a custom shop that he's going to create, and he's going to start working on RBs exclusively, leaving his full-time job. And at the time, this sounded fantastic. I'd been talking to this guy for, 9 months, and we had kind of developed a rapport, and, he seemed like a decent guy. And so about that January 2021, we discussed plans to kind of give him what I said at the time was more kind of like a test to see, what his skill set was, because, I was reluctant at first, and I am, for new people. I like to, see capabilities before I make any major commitments or send any referrals, because ultimately these things come back to bite me in the ass. So we discussed to send an RB25 Neo block to him and do a forged build. And at the time, I also had a spare Neo head I picked up, and I was going to send it to Derek, and Derek was going to do a full head build, port polish, install the entire valve train, and we were going to do a shimless bucket conversion on it. So that February 4th, the pallet got shipped off to him. It included, like I said, the RB30 block, the RB25 Neo, the Neo head, and I sent Derek a slew of other parts for that RB25 Neo build. So at the end of March 2021, I had a customer contact me about looking for a recommendation for a shop to fix, I believe it was a spun bearing in his RB26. At the time, I recommended Derek, and I later arranged for that customer's engine to be shipped on a pallet over to Derek's shop so he could complete the work after him and the customer had arranged the terms of their contract. Fast forward a bit until about mid-May or so, he actually sent me some photos of himself working on my engine. So that was cool. So now we're getting into June. Derek lets me know one day, and he tells me that the engine is completely done. It's finished. And he provided photos of a complete RB, so I was happy. Now, right around now, shortly after was when things started to kind of go sour. At the time, Derek was starting to, I don't want to say work with us, but work alongside us in a pretty tight-knit group of very nice, companies and people in the Skyline industry. And we were preparing to bring in like a shipping container from Australia, and we had some other parties involved because there was, a lot of items in a container, and containers are very expensive to import. So we decided to have Hans from HXC Performance outside our garage, and at the time, Derek from Simply RB. We were going to all split the fees to import the container and agree to purchase a very large sum of merchandise from Bostock in Australia. But I started to become concerned about Derek because he kept on adding things into his order, and he never really, I don't want to say showed proof of his financial ability to pay for what he was adding to the order, but I was just concerned that from the conversations that I had had with him outside of our business, that this might be a bit of a stretch for him. So we started to try to, organize collecting payment and get Aaron paid for merchandise and get the, the export shipping off the ground. So I started giving people estimates on, what they were going to be owed. And, weeks started to go by. I started following up with Derek, and he just kept on saying, he'll get to it. He's waiting for payments to come in. But then like a month goes by, and like still now even weeks after that month are going by and nothing's happening. So we're starting to get worried, to say the least. And Aaron, from Bostock, is getting a bit sour, rightfully so, because we have to move this container ASAP. It can't sit, and he doesn't want to move it without getting paid. So eventually it just got so late that we had to get it going, and Derek still had not paid. And basically, I guess he had a conversation with Aaron, and come to find out, Derek did not have any money. So we were all kind of up Schitt's Creek at that point. And we really, not so much as like the lack of financial ability, but the poor communication that led to the situation was what bothered me the most. It was the type of behavior, completely honestly, that you would expect to see from somebody in like elementary school. And there was no real remorse because this man had three other parties involved that were all depending on that. And if he wasn't going to be able to hold his end of the bargain, it was going to hurt those other parties. So that behavior by Derek right there kind of cemented in my mind that I did not want to be working in a business relationship with this man anymore. So early in July of 2021, now we're getting like later into the summer, I started inquiring about my head. So I asked him earlier on in July, I was like, hey, what's going on with the head? And I didn't get a response this time. And so, I figured, whatever, he's probably busy. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe he doesn't like that question. Maybe there's something going on. So later on, like almost into August now, I asked him again about, what's going on with the head. I reached out. And then I was told that it was going to be finished by September. Now we're into August, and one of the first customers that I had referred to Derek to get his engine fixed, messaged me out of nowhere on Facebook. He starts off with all of these claims about Derek, and this man is upset, mostly because of the communication or lack of communication or even deception that Derek has presented him with, and he just wants his engine back. I contacted Derek. I was like, hey, Derek, what's going on about this customer's engine? He needs to get an update from you right now. I reminded Derek that this was a referral that I sent him. So I guess Derek reached out at some point in the middle of August, and he talked to the customer, and it appeared that they had worked things out. So now we're into probably like, I don't know, around the 20th or so of September. And I'm like, you know, where's my cylinder head? I was supposed to be finished by September. So in my mind, that's like September 1, my cylinder head should be finished. And, you know, again, like I don't normally press people on this type of stuff. I generally have like some patience, but like I'm just kind of fed up with this. I'm done with this guy. I just want to like get this stuff done, get it out of my life and move on. So then he starts telling me like that it's going to be like to the end of the month or like the first week in October. So I'm like, all right. So a couple days after that, I get contacted again. The customer who had previously contacted me having problems with Derek. And this guy is now so upset. He is just ready to lose it. He's claiming that Derek has been lying to him about the entire time, claiming that Derek said that he was going to ship this and then never shipped it, and then like, you know, oh, like the freight company didn't pick it up or blah, blah, blah. Just like, it was just one after the other, just like everything just was not going good. So I looked at some of the communication that this guy had with Derek, because he was at the point where he was fed up, like I said. So like there was screenshots of conversations, and there was people being called out on stuff, and like it was a bad situation. This guy was like on the verge of going out, you know, to fly out to South Dakota and rent a truck and bring back his engine with him because he was just totally done. So again, I reached out to Derek, trying to diffuse the situation, and I really pressed him pretty hard that time. And I was like, Derek, you got to get this guy's shit on a pallet, and you got to provide me with the tracking when it leaves, and you got to take a picture of this thing when it hits the truck. And you got to do it like now. So a couple days later, they ended up working it out. He got the engine packed up, it was on a pallet, and he sent me a picture of it in the back of a truck. So I was like, take a deep breath. All right, so now I'm going back into trying to finish up all this stuff with the container. And October, you know, I think it was the 5th or something, I'm like, Derek, you know, where's my cylinder head? And he's like, oh, well, it's not ready yet, but it'll be ready by the time that Hans comes later this month. So Hans was supposed to be going up later in the month to Derek's shop, and Derek was going to be driving out with Hans to come and pick up all of the stuff that was in the container that belonged to them. So I was like, all right, that makes sense, I guess. But at this point, I'm so beyond done with this situation that I'm like telling Hans that, like, you know, dude, make sure that my shit is on that truck before you leave. So like, I just felt like something was up at this point. Something was going on with Derek. I mean, that one customer's testimony and evidence was just throwing me off, and like, this is not somebody that I want to be involved with. So get my stuff back, you know. So this is when things started to get like even more interesting. So a couple days later, Aaron from Boost Stock introduces me to another customer. I guess this was one of the first customers that had ever done work with Derek. Not going to name any names, obviously, but we got right on the phone with this guy and started talking to him. And he started sending us pictures. He started sending us videos. And this guy was pissed. I mean, like, just like the other customer that I had spoke about, this guy was furious. And he had actually gotten his car back. So this man hired Derek to do a full engine build, 1,000 horsepower R32, so GTR, beautiful, 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 gorgeous car. Paid him a lot of money, big lump sum down payment. Had agreed to all of these, you know, aftermarket parts, very expensive parts list. So he had received videos of Derek joyriding in his car, causing damage to it. he was already upset with Derek regarding all the delays and the excuses just over and over again, like very similar to the first customer that I spoke to you about. So he actually drove all the way from New Jersey to South Dakota to recover his car. Derek gave him the runaround for like 4 or 5 days or something. And finally, he was able to recover his car with the help of the police department. And it was an absolute mess when I got it back. An absolute mess. And I mean, like, parts were everywhere. There was dents and cuts into the chassis, scratches over the body. Half of the requested work that was contracted out was incomplete. The car was missing parts. The car had parts on it that were used and didn't belong to the owner. So that was kind of interesting. It was at that time that it was like a holy shit moment. Because Aaron and I were sitting there and we were thinking to ourselves, and he said it the best. He's like, dude, well, he probably didn't say dude, he probably said, mate, if only half of what this guy's saying is true, that's still just absolutely horrible. So that was the moment where we were like, we have to get out of this situation now. We have to cut off all ties. We have to exit. And so the one thing we were worried about was Hans at the time, Hans from HXC Performance, because Hans was still doing work with Derek, and you still had ties to Derek's shop because Derek had committed to doing a number of engine builds for him. You know, we like Hans. Hans is a good guy. He's an honest, hardworking dude, and he does phenomenal work on Skyline. So we did not want to see Hans get taken down by Derek. So I remember having a really long late night phone call with Hans, trying to help him, you know, create like an exit strategy away from this situation, because we could just tell that this was not gonna end well. So a couple days later, I sent Derek a message and like formally and forcefully declared that I wanted all of my items that belonged to me returned to me when Derek comes down to our shop in order to pick up Hans's delivery of the container. So Hans drives, I think it was like 7 or 8 hours or something like that, from Missouri to South Dakota in the morning. I think that was like the 17th of October. And he gets there and Derek's nowhere to be found. We kind of had a sinking suspicion that this was going to be the case, but the story takes an even more dramatic turn at this point. So Hans is like at the shop, nobody's there. We're trying to get a hold of Derek. He's not answering his phone. And then finally he answers like a Facebook message from me, and he claims to have attempted to commit suicide. But at this point in the game, I guess I'll call it, whether this was real or not, this seemed so well timed and executed and manufactured that it was almost unbelievable. And now, I mean, I can't tell you whether or not he actually did this, whether or not it was actually real, but I will tell you that he certainly did go ahead and provide me with enough evidence of the fact that it was actually happening. He sent me a photo of himself with an AR-15 to his forehead. He sent me a video that he recorded of himself saying goodbye to the world right before supposedly a police officer doing his rounds at Derek's shop was able to run across his shop floor and dive on him, taking the gun out of his hand before he could pull the trigger because the safety was on. So, I mean, again, I don't want to be unsympathetic, but I did not believe one bit of the story. And it was a clear diversion, a tactic to avoid a situation that he could not face himself, because he knew that he had no capability, no ground to stand on, and he was going to be called out. So I didn't give him any sympathy. I tried to stay as business oriented as possible. I continued to tell him to call Hans because poor Hans is sitting there trying to get his stuff and figure out how he's going to get his stuff from New York now, because he still has to get all of his stuff from us in New York. And Derek was supposed to help, so he completely cut off ties with Hans at that point. So it was like, I think the same day all this was going on, that first customer that I told you about, who I referred to have their engine fixed, he reached out to me again. So I was like, hey dude, maybe it would be smart for you to take a look at that engine that Derek shipped back to you. And, let's do some basic checks on it to see how it looks before you drop it in your car and try to start it up. So we did that, and I walked him through taking a look at timing, and we tried to turn the engine over by hand, and come to find out that the engine would not turn over by hand. So we later find out there's a whole slew of things wrong with that engine, and he actually finds like a foreign object inside the engine. So that would have grenaded immediately if he tried to start it up. So now we're like, can Derek even build an RB? So I think it was around like October 21st, whatever, shortly after all this like nonsense went crazy, and Derek blocked me on Facebook, removed me as a friend, and he deleted his entire Simply RB Facebook business page. So when somebody does this, I think it's pretty clear to say that he has no intention of returning any of my goods. He has no intention of continuing his business. And then you start to wonder about what is going to happen to my property. And then there was also like, I started to think about, the invoices that I had paid Derek. So I had paid Derek a number of invoices over the course of the summer when everything was going good, for an entire Ferrea valve train for my head, for Kelford cams for my head, for port and polishing work for the head, even, for the assembly of the RB25 Neo block. And like now things are starting to race through my mind, like, did he actually order those parts? Or is this like a scam? Like what's going on? So we're trying to figure out. So, Aaron and I and Brandon and Hans at this point are like, we have to find some more of the customers because their cars are in his shop, and if he's doing this to us, what is he doing to them? So over the course of the next few days, we found, I think, about 90% of his customers. And I mean, I can even remember one particular day, we were on the phone until like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, talking to people that we had never met before, reaching out to them desperately, hoping that they would understand what we're saying. And remarkably, almost every single person that we spoke with came to believe what we were telling them very easily, because they all had a similar story. So Derek's, I'm going to call it like scheme, kind of goes as follows. So we discovered that he would take a deposit, like cash deposit, and he would take the car or the engine. And if it was a car, he would have like a progress photo that he did, and that progress photo would generally show the car up on jack stands with the engine removed, with the front end of the car off. And almost every one of his customers has a photo like this, and that's like generally only the one progress photo that they would receive. Beyond that, if somebody asked for a progress photo on their engine build, he would supply them with a photo of an engine. A lot of the customers came forward and showed the rest of the group the photos that they had received from Derek. And the majority of them, if not all of the photos, I believe, that were provided to the customers were photos of my engine that Derek claimed to have finished back in, I think, June. So even like there was customers at the time who were still kind of like on the fence about Derek, like, you know, he's going to come through, blah blah blah. And I was like, here, look, he sent me a picture of my engine and it's complete. He's working on it, you know, there's progress. And I would be like, well, that engine that you just sent me, that's not even an RB26, and you sent him an RB26, right? That's an RB25. So like things like that, or like that's not an RB30, that's an RB25, and like very easily identifiable. And so in some cases they were the same exact picture, like the same exact picture. Like, here, let me send you this picture, the one that I already sent to this guy. So everybody was already kind of on edge about this. So, you know, it's just like you keep on digging, and then we started to realize how much money was outstanding. And we're talking about like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if you started counting cars that were still in the shop at the time, because keep in mind, like, Derek had deleted his Facebook page, he had blocked a lot of the people that were his customers, and he still had their cars in his shop, still had their engines in his shop, all the personal possessions and property. And we didn't know if he had any intention of returning any of this stuff. Immediately after the suicide attempt, Derek supposedly fled South Dakota in one of his customers' cars. I don't know exactly where he went, but he just kind of went off the grid for about a week or two or something. At this point, you know, all of his customers were looking for him, trying to contact him, figure out what the hell was going on with their stuff. Later on, we found out online that Derek was inquiring in some sailing related Facebook groups about which yachts are the best to buy for sailing around the world. I fully believe that it was Derek's intention to flee, because he knew that he knew obviously all the things that he had done were illegal, and he knew that we would be catching up with him shortly, and that police are going to be involved, and he would get arrested. So in a later post, I found Derek referencing a specific boat that was up in Canada that he was inquiring about, and it seemed like he had his heart set on this. And he mentioned in that post that he was going to sell off all of his toys to fund the purchase of the yacht. Now, at the time, Derek, as far as we understood, didn't have any money, didn't have any toys to sell. So it's only takes a little bit of going out there on a limb to assume that he means the toys are all of his assets, all of his customers' cars, everything that is in his shop that he has access to. So we started to get pretty nervous that time was running out for us to recover any of our personal property. So we tried to expedite the timetable with the police, and I mean, things move at the pace they need to move, and I'm not going to get into that. But at the time, one of his customers was out trying to get to the shop to figure out what was going on with Derek, and obviously Derek was nowhere to be found. I went to the police, and he was trying to get things resolved, but the kid had drove like 10-something hours, and he was exhausted. He'd been there for a few days. Nothing had come out of it. And on the last day, he was just parked outside of Derek's shop, and he was getting ready to leave. And it just so happened that right before he left, the garage door on Derek's shop opened up, and he saw Derek. So he immediately called the police. The police showed up, and Derek was there, and so was a flatbed pickup that was driving around the lot. And I can't substantiate this or know if it was true or not, but it appeared that the situation was playing out like Derek was going to remove all the vehicles in that shop and potentially sell them to fund payment for this yacht to then go flee to Canada and get into the ocean and disappear. At that point, I guess they didn't feel that they had enough evidence to hold Derek, so they ended up releasing him, but they kept his cell phone because they believed that his cell phone contained communication between him and his customers that would provide evidence to the case that we were working on. And it did. It provided an incredible amount of evidence. And Derek was picked up later after a warrant was issued for his arrest, and he was arrested. This happened a few days afterwards. And Derek was charged with grand theft, multiple accounts of theft by deception. I'll show the police reports up here and kind of dig into some of that a little bit. So Derek spent Christmas and New Year's in the jail in South Dakota. As far as we understand, there is some sort of a plea deal on the table. I'm not sure if it's been finalized or not, but Derek will be getting time served, probation, and he's being required to pay back all of the customer's losses. Now, to everybody involved, this does not sound like justice, because we know how these things go. People get out, they never pay these bills back. Now, this whole time, we started, after we realized that Derek didn't really know much about RBs, and he didn't know much about building things, and we started to hear some other things from sources that I'm not going to get into about Derek's situation and his history. And we really started to quote unquote question everything about him and his business. One of the things that we started to question was the legitimacy of the ownership that he claimed over the Burgundy R32 GTR. So, doing what we do, we started looking at that car and trying to determine its origin, who it belongs to, who it's registered to, etc., because if you look at the car, any of the pictures that Derek had sent us or were publicly available at the time, the car had Louisiana license plates on it, and it had a designation that referred to an active duty military registrant. So we actually had one of Derek's customers was in the military, and he was able to request information about Derek's military access, and we found out that there is no military access whatsoever for anyone named Derek Allen Banks, or any of Derek Banks or Derek Allen or whatever. So we knew that he wasn't in the military, at least it wasn't on record. So that kind of cemented the idea that this GTR doesn't belong to him. Knowing what he's done so far, it wouldn't be a stretch to think that it could potentially be stolen, or it could be another customer's car. So we started digging for this guy. We started trying to find who the owner was, and initially we couldn't really drum up anything. The VIN plate on the engine chassis was very blurry in a lot of the photographs, and it was just, you just couldn't make it out. We had given the information for the license plate to the police a number of times. I don't know exactly what they did with that information, whether they were able to run the plate or not, but we never heard anything back. We tried to run the plate privately through some connections we have, but we're unable to do so. So that was kind of dropped back in the back burner for a little while. But after we finally were able to recover property, we did have some eyes in the shop again, and we examined that GTR that was in Derek's shop more recently, and come to find out that the VIN plate on the firewall had been removed, and the VIN stamping on the firewall, where it's actually physically stamped into the firewall, had been like bondoed, sanded over, and primed. So this kind of like reignited like a fire to figure out who the owner was, because obviously Derek knew that whatever situation was going on there, it was illegal, and he was trying to make sure that that car was not identifiable. in any crude way, shape, or form that he could. So we started searching and digging one night, and we ended up finding, one of the customers ended up finding a post on Instagram from the company's name that was on the spark cover on the engine bay of the car that Derek claimed to be his. And as he scrolled back, he found a post, and it showed a picture of the car. It had a comment on it by somebody else that we assumed maybe might have been the owner of that car. So I reached out to that person, and they got back to me like very quickly. And I started asking him questions about the Burgundy R32 GTR, and I was like, "Do you own this? Like, did you sell this to Derek Banks?" And the guy says, "No, I sold it to this other guy." And I was like, "Well, you wouldn't happen to have his name and his contact information?" Because I explained to him a little bit of what was going on, and he was more than willing to help. And so he had all the information for the guy that he sold it to. And this guy was from Louisiana, and he was active duty military. And he had just gotten back from his tour in November. So I sent him a message, left him a voicemail, and we got in touch the next day. And I got to hear the whole story about the Burgundy R32 GTR. This car does not belong to Derek. I guess at one point in time, close to 2 years ago, there was an agreement between the two where Derek was going to purchase that GTR from this gentleman who was in the military. He was going to make payments on it once a month over the course of about 2 years and pay it off with a relatively substantial purchase price. And according to the owner of the car, who still has the title and the car is registered to, he tells me that Derek paid the first 2 months and stopped making payments after that. He said that communication with Derek has been spotty at best, and he's been trying to get a hold of him to figure out what's going on, like where's his money. Keep in mind, this guy was deployed for 2 years overseas, so Derek continued to fraud him about the car, not make payments, not communicate properly. And this guy didn't really have too much time to go after Derek, but now that he's back, he's going to do what he can to try to get his car back. The unfortunate thing for the owner of the GTR is that Derek not only has defaced the car by removing the VIN and patching over the stamp VIN, but the car is on jack stands. The Workmeister wheels that were on it have been sold. The engine is gone. The car has been hacked up. We know for a fact that numerous parts from that car are on other customers' cars because that's what Derek would do. As I described before, he would take a part off, put it on somebody else's car, and somebody went to pick up the car. He would make sure that they had as much of a complete car as he could assemble with all the car parts that he had in the shop. So this poor armed service guy who is out serving his country comes back home to find out that Derek Allen Banks has completely stripped down one of his prized possessions, completely, disgracing it and leaving him with a shell that's worth a fraction of what it would have been 2 years ago. And there was also a number of customers that had given Derek personal property, such as a car, as partial payment to work to be done either on their engine or their other car. And we identified a few of those people pretty quickly, but there was a few random cars in the shop that we didn't know who they belonged to. One was a red S2000. Derek had used this to flee the shop after his attempted suicide. This car was also raced, beat up, abused by Derek. Videos of him going over 100-something miles per hour down the road in the middle of South Dakota in the middle of the night. There's photo evidence of him crashing the car. We don't know the story behind that. But keep in mind, guys, like this car didn't belong to Derek. This car was a down payment on work to be rendered that the title was going to be transferred over to Derek after the work was finished. This guy truly believed that if he had it in his possession, it was his. If you told him it was going to be his, it was his now. This is not how you act as a person. This is not how you act as a business. This is just like, again, like childish behavior, like elementary school behavior. I wish I could say that was the only person that he had as far as like cars in his possession, but he would routinely drive other customers' cars, and he would claim to the world that they were his own, and he was receiving all this like clout on social media because people looked up to him and they thought he was a cool dude who had all sorts of cool cars and he was doing all sorts of cool shit. TikTok was his main, venue for being an RB hero or king of the RBs or whatever the hell they call him over there. The only thing that he's a king of is just deception and lies. So, I mean, at this point in the game, where are we now? We're January 10th. So January 10th, I think it was last week, we finally were able to remove almost all the property from Derek's shop that belonged to his customers. That includes cars, shells, engines, parts, you name it. Almost everything is going out of the shop now, thanks to the local police department. And as of right now, I mean, my personal items are sitting at another one of the customers' homes in the Midwest, and I am looking forward to getting a freight pickup and bringing it home. I know that it's going to be somewhat depressing because I'm not going to be getting what I paid for, anywhere near what I paid for, and anything that I do get is going to end up having to be disassembled and checked and reassembled, and hopefully everything goes back the same way that it should without any damage. But you got to look at it as like I guess it's better to get something back than nothing. So just to quickly recap, guys. Again, I said at the beginning of this video that I hope this stands to serve a purpose in the future, and I do firmly believe that Derek Allen Banks will continue this behavior, probably in a different scene, different community, different location. It's who he is. It's sad, and I mean this is big what just happened, but if it can, hopefully this will help somebody. And if it can't help anybody, just look at it as an opportunity to learn something. And I don't want to say never trust anybody, because that's not the type of community that I want to be a part of. But I do want to say that definitely do your homework and be thorough. And talk to people, get referrals, get references, and do your best before you send off to somebody that you're questioning. Things can escalate, pretty quickly, and they did, like very quickly in this story. Things went from like, this might be kind of bad to, wow, very, very quickly. And even to this day, like we're still finding out things that it just kind of adds to, I don't know. I mean, I try to laugh at it a little bit at this point, because what else can you do? You have to take some humor out of it. Otherwise, you're just going to cry all the time about all the money that's gone, about all the stress and anxiety and lost hours of family time and work time that you've lost dealing with this type of situation. And let me tell you, there has been a tremendous amount of time lost trying to rectify the situation. I feel that it's been my responsibility to the community to do as much as I can to try to help everybody involved.